ABC News. A special presentation. The best of Nightline with Ted Koppel.
Good evening. This is a new broadcast in the sense that it is permanent and will continue after the Iran crisis is over. All right, let's get it out of the way. Yes, the ravages of time do leave their mark. That was 10 years ago when Nightline began. And from the very first night, the executive producer, Bill Lord, and I were trying to put people on the same program who, under normal circumstances, would never talk to each other.
In talking to Mrs. Moorfield, I said, look, you have a chance to speak to this Iranian official on behalf of all of the hostages. Take advantage of that.
Why are we not being allowed to hear from the hostages? Why are we not corresponding with them? Why are there so few phone calls coming out? Why isn't there mail coming out of that embassy in Tehran?
Well, perhaps one reason is because your CIA is so sophisticated. I think really the security measure is the main reason behind this.
It became a hallmark of the program. We called it Bringing People Together Who Are Worlds Apart.
What is your opinion about my peace is the opportunity for me to live within my own secure boundaries.
They're in bed with the Libyans and the PLO, and that's what they're bringing right here into our neighborhood, and we don't like it.
All right, Mr. Benjania, Grant, hold on just one second.
Enemies of the U.S.? That you drive to the capital of my country and then topple down its government, and you call that a holy war under Islam. Now,
what's an important part of my country which was occupied by your government?
I'm just observing what happens in South Africa, and the vast majority of blacks in this country...
You are so superior that you know better than me about my own people?
I am observing...
Are you so superior?
There have now been about 2,500 Nightlines since we first began. Obviously, there's far too much material to remember everything in 1 hour, and most of the programs, it must be said, are quite forgettable. But there are some moments really worth remembering. And that's what we're going to try and show you, beginning over the next few minutes with a quick montage to refresh your memories.
I started watching Nightline when the hostage situation happened.
Tonight, an exclusive interview with Iran's former foreign minister, Sadegh Ghozbadeh. Do you believe that the hostages will all be free soon? I hope you're right.
I really hope it's depths of my heart that they'll all get home.
When something happens, you know Nightline is going to cover it, and you know they're going to cover it well.
When I saw that girl let go, something just told me, go in after her.
The Jim and Tammy Baker interview stands out, but I think Tammy Baker stands out anywhere.
And I enjoy shopping. It's kind of a hobby to help my nerves.
Jim Baker.
Better than a psychiatrist.
What's happening to the stock market and the economy?
And for those of us who need it, clarifications from some who specialize in plain talk.
One would wish, I suppose, for a bull market to drive the bears out.
No, we don't want that. We never want that.
You could forget the Gary Hart interview where he was seated next to Ted and proceeded to tell everything that happened to him.
I made a serious mistake. I should not have been in the company of any woman, not my wife.
All of us have combinations of liberal and conservative about us, Ted. I'm not
Governor, forgive me, that's been your answer now for 3 months.
Yeah, but...
Yes, things went wrong, and I've admitted it, and Dan, I'll take all the credit, all the blame for that.
Dan's the other fella.
I like it when Koppel takes it out into location. This is the audience participation.
They live in South Africa, ma'am.
Where do you live, sir?
Do you want to know? I live in Sanson.
Oh, good.
I live just around the corner from you, ma'am.
Oh, my word, I must move.
We've had a law in California since 1957 which makes it a misdemeanor for a person with a venereal disease to have sexual relations with another human.
Has it ever been used?
That's not the point, it's the law, it's the standard.
That's the law. But it's the law. That's what you people do.
Do you know what happens to the civil liberties in a society when you start making criminals? That's right, I care about civil liberties.
I do too.
I care about
the civil liberties of society.
And
so
the fact do I.
Well, I'm not so sure,
Alan. I want to stop the victimization of innocent people who have not chosen to use drugs.
Drug users
and the answer is not to put people in jail.
They are abusers.
I'm the addict, not him. I brought him into this world, suffering. It's not the outside, it's the inside.
Reporting from South Africa, Ted Koppel.
Tonight, we have only one guest, Nelson Mandela.
To spend 27 years at the prime of your life is a tragedy. And I regret, those years that I have wasted in prison.
Do you ever watch Nightline?
No.
Why not?
Because it's past my bedtime.
Yeah, a lot of older people keep telling me the same thing. Still, there have been quite a few programs that you might have enjoyed if you'd only stayed up that late. There was that first interview, you just saw a snippet of it a moment ago, with Gary Hart after the business with Donna Rice. More of that and some other memorable moments from the last 10 years of Nightline when we come back.
How you feeling? How you feeling? How you feeling? How you feeling?
A hot booking is getting a guest that everyone wants to talk to.
During the spring and summer of 1987, there wasn't a news organization in the country that didn't want to interview Gary Hart, with two questions topping the list. Was he getting back into the race for president? And had there been an affair with Donna Rice?
The National Enquirer has now published pictures of Hart and Rice together that suggest a closer relationship.
There's the picture, which you have probably seen to such a point that you yes. feel like throwing up every yes. time you see it. But there's the picture of you with Donna Rice perched on your lap.
Yes.
On the boat.
No, it wasn't on the boat.
Well,
on a pier, on a public pier.
On a public pier.
Yeah.
Again, Senator, we're not now talking about having men and women for friends. We're talking about something that certainly has about it every possible impression of impropriety.
I know. It was a very, very bad mistake. I've already said that. I will continue to say it. I have to live with that for the rest of my life. It was suggested I have my picture taken with Miss Rice, this attractive lady whom I had only recently been introduced to. Dropped into my lap. I was embarrassed. I chose not to dump her off, and the picture was taken. I shouldn't have been in that situation. I should not have been in that situation. It was a very serious mistake.
One of the truly remarkable things about living in America today is that if you're in public life, a certain percentage of what you do has got to be done on television. Sometimes that can be terribly painful, as it must have been for Senator Hart when he came on Nightline.
I'm not a perfect man, Mr. Koppel. I'm a human. I commit sins. The Bible I read says we all commit sins. Mine happen to be pretty visible.
I told you some days ago when we spoke, and I told our audience this evening, that I would ask you both questions. I will ask you the first now, just before we take a break, because I think I know what your answer is going to be. Did you have an affair with Ms. Rice?
Mr. Koppel, if the question is, in the 29 years of my marriage, including 2 public separations, have I been absolutely and totally faithful to my wife? I regret to say the answer is no. But I also am never going to answer any specific questions about any individual. I have no privacy. My wife has privacy, and other innocent people have privacy. And I don't care what questions are asked tonight or any time in the future. I'm not going to answer them on any specific instance. Now, I've been forced to make a declaration here that I think is unprecedented in American political history, and I regret it. That question should never have been asked, and I shouldn't have to answer it. But I will say to you this, and I would say this to the National Press Corps: never ask another candidate that question.
In November of 1982, the Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev died, and we had an unprecedented collection of guests. 2 former secretaries of state and 3 former presidents of the United States, all on the same program.
As a communist, believe me, he was as tough and ruthless and frankly able as anyone I've ever met.
My real belief is that from the bottom of his heart, he wanted to avoid any kind of war or conflict that would directly affect the Soviet people.
He could be a very, very tough, very staunch negotiator on behalf of the Soviet Union.
But quite frankly, it's not always the biggest names that produce the most memorable programs. Sometimes what sticks in people's memories is the aura, the atmosphere of an interview.
Well, there's only one guest who felt she was treated unfairly. And I think Ted subsequently apologized, and that was Geraldine Ferrara.
What's your worst fear?
Oh, messing up in an interview on television, probably. I mean, that's the biggest fear I have. The rest of this, the easy stuff, like foreign policy and arms control, I can handle that stuff. You can hear the Wall Street Journal repeating what the administration says time and time and time again.
Yeah, but we are talking...
Let me finish.
Yeah, but we're talking facts here, Ms. Ferraro.
No, what you were saying and what this Wall Street Journal is saying, what the administration is saying, is that we are not at equal basis with each other, that we are an inferior force, and that is not a fact.
No,
the Joint Chiefs of Staff...
Forgive me, I'm not saying anything. I'm asking you, when you say between
well, I'm
us...
saying no.
The complaint was that I treated her differently than if I'd been interviewing a male candidate for national office. Actually, I think what people may have been reacting to is that I treated Geraldine Ferraro precisely the way I would have treated any other national candidate. When you say between us, we're building 5 or 6 a day, I'm asking you, how many are the Soviets building and how many are we building?
I'm saying, you want me to say we're building 3 and they're building 2, and one day they're building 3 and they're building 2? I don't know, but between us we have 5 or 6 a day.
If that's the reality of it, yes. Still, she felt I treated her badly, as did several of my colleagues in whom I have a great deal of confidence. So I called and I apologized. I don't think that ever caused me to pull punches in later campaigns, though, with other candidates.
Do you want to start back over with the rationale of why we didn't think it was arms for hostages?
I understand. I understand the rationale.
I think I'm entitled. Well, but you just don't like my answer.
No, what I'm saying is I find your answer...
You asked the question, but you don't like the answer. What do you want me to say?
I find the answer inconsistent with the evidence is what I'm saying, Mr. Vice President.
That's your opinion. That's fine, then.
There were basically 2 subjects that I pushed with Vice President Bush at the time, Iran-Contra and Noriega. Maybe it was just the atmosphere, but he kept confusing me with another newsman.
And yes, things went wrong, and I've admitted it. And Dan, I'll take all the credit, all the blame for that.
Dan's the other fella.
I mean, Ted, you sound like Mike Dukakis and Jesse Jackson.
No, I'll tell you what. That's why I tried to say at the beginning of this program, and
you did. That's right.
And you recognize this.
I take that back. No,
you're gonna take the positive issues in your campaign speeches and in your advertising. Yeah. It's up to me to raise some of the negative ones. I just want to...
Just so we get equal time, just so you dwell on the negatives with the same amount of time for the opponents as you do for me. I think that's a fair deal.
I think you can count on it.
Let me
just...
I can't wait to tune in.
The point that I'm trying to make, you're still coming back with the same answers that you've been giving for weeks now. And what I'm saying to you, or at least suggesting to you, is that the Bush campaign, as much as you may not like the way it's being handled, is effective as all get out. Well, I'm not sure. I think people are turning out.
Well, if the polls, well, but not yet. Well, if anything, the polls are moving further and further away from victory for you.
My sense is that people are turning off to the campaign.
Based on what?
Based on my own reading of what's happening out there, my own contact with people, and what our people are telling us. I think there's still a long way to go, and this kind of campaign, 13 days, is a very long time. And
no, it's not. 13 days is almost nothing. I've always felt that Governor Dukakis had been badly served by his staff on that occasion. Instead of scheduling a light day so that he could prepare for what was, after all, a 90-minute network interview, they kept him campaigning from 5:30 in the morning until just an hour or so before Nightline at 11:30 that night. He was exhausted, and it showed.
What is a liberal in 1988? That's maybe a question that we ought to ask George Bush if he had been here.
No, I'd like to hear what your definition.
Well, I think all of us have combinations of liberal and conservative about us, Ted. I'm not
Governor,
a liberal.
Forgive me. That's been your answer now for 3 months.
Yeah, but
I'd like to hear what you define. What is a liberal?
Well, if one is a liberal in the tradition of Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman and John Kennedy, and I'm
1988, Governor.
One is somebody who cares deeply about people, sees concerns, sees opportunities to make a real difference in the lives of real people, and works hard in public service to help make that difference in a way that will improve the quality of life of all of our people. But like most people, I have certain conservative instincts as well.
In one sense, with all due respect, let me suggest to you, I still don't think you get it. That may have been pushing things a little, and who knows what might have happened if Governor Dukakis had pushed back hard. It's difficult to believe that anything could have won the election for him at that point, but there was a moment to be seized just then, and he never did. When we come back, one of the most surprising interviews I've ever done. A few ill-chosen words that changed the face of Major League Baseball. The Al Campanis program. One of my favorite expressions is from Mark Twain. He said, "We're all ignorant just about different things." Everyone who's ever worked at Nightline knows how ignorant I am about baseball. Tonight, we'll look at the man who broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball, Jackie Robinson. So it follows, I suppose, that one of the most controversial, most influential Nightline interviews I ever did was part of a program on baseball.
I think if Jack were alive today, Jack would say, how come there are no blacks running ball clubs?
Mr. Campanis, it's a legitimate question. You're an old friend of Jackie Robinson's, but it's a tough question for you. You're still in baseball. Why is it that there are no black managers, no black general managers, no black owners? And I guess what I'm really asking you is to, peel it away a little bit. Just tell me, why do you think it is? Is there still that much prejudice in baseball today?
No, I don't believe it's prejudice. I truly believe that they may not have some of the necessities to be, let's say, a field manager or perhaps a general manager.
You really believe that?
Well, I don't say that they're all of them, but they certainly are short. How many quarterbacks do you have? How many pitchers do you have that are black?
That really sounds like garbage, if you forget
no,
to say so.
It's not garbage, Mr. Koppel, because I played on a college team, and the center fielder was black, and then the backfield at NYU with a fullback who was black. Never knew the difference of whether he was black or white. We were teammates. So it just might be that why are black men or black people not good swimmers? Because they don't have the buoyancy.
Oh, it may just be that they don't have access to all the country clubs and the pools. But I'll tell you what, let's take a break and we'll continue our discussion in a moment.
When Al Campanis said what he said, everything in that control room pretty much stopped. And the audio guy said, I don't believe, did you hear what he just said? And the TD said, yeah, I heard that. Did he really say that?
Al Campanis, from everything I understand, you're a very decent man and a highly respected man in baseball. I confessed to you before we began this program, baseball is not one of my areas of expertise. I'd like to give you another chance to dig yourself out, because I think you need it.
I have never said that the blacks are not intelligent. I think many of them are highly intelligent, but they may not have the desire to be in the front office. They're fleet of foot. And this is why there are a lot of black Major League ball players. Now, as far as having the background to become club presidents, presidents of a bank, I don't know.
The interview created an uproar. Campanis was fired by the Dodgers the next day, and civil rights organizations stepped up their demands for and got some jobs for minorities in the front office. AIDS has been one of the big stories of the decade. It took most of us in television some time to grasp the dimensions of the illness and the prejudice that went with it. It was 1986 when we focused in on the lives of a gay couple, one of whom, Ken Meeks, had tested HIV positive. You know, in one sense, this story, your story, has been a story of watching a disease take its toll. But in another sense, it has been very much a chronicle of a love story. You two love each other very much, don't you?
Yes, indeed.
That's something also that a lot of people in the straight community have a great deal of trouble understanding. I don't know whether it's, if someone said to me, explain why you love your wife, I'm not sure I could do that to their satisfaction either. But let me ask you both, why do you love each other? Jack?
This is the most special human being I've ever met in my life. This man has more love and compassion inside of him than a football stadium full of people. And not only does he treat me that way, he treats everyone that way.
Meeks wanted this interview on live television to be one of his last conscious acts. He wanted somehow to connect with the rest of humanity.
By millions of people. You know that you're near death, don't you?
Yes,
How near?
very. I'm afraid that it's going to be a matter of days, maybe not even that long.
I think I will leave it with that by asking you why it is so important to you that quite literally you are willing to expend some of your last breaths on saying what you're going to say now.
You know, we all have things we have to do. This is one thing I feel I have to do. There are 220, 240 million people out there calling themselves Americans. There are billions of other people out there in the world who call themselves human beings. And I have an obligation to them, just as they have an obligation to me.
Ken Meeks died 1 week to the day after this interview. Ryan White was a so-called innocent victim of AIDS. That was a polite way of saying that he wasn't gay or an intravenous drug user. He got the disease from a bad blood transfusion. By the end of his life, he also got a lot of compassion, but it was awfully late coming.
You and I were chatting, before we went on the air, and you were telling me some of the charges that the kids were leveling against you while you were in school back in Kokomo. Just tell our audience about that, would you?
Well, they marked my folders. They marked fag and other cruel things.
I was talking about, they accused you of what, spitting on the vegetables or something?
Yeah, spitting on vegetables and taking bites out of cookies and putting them back.
Why would people do that? Just to be spiteful, or because they're scared?
Well, I think they were scared first and foremost, and it just led to where, their fear just took control of them, and they just believed what they wanted to believe.
How do you think about the future? Do you deal in days, you deal in weeks, you deal in months, or do you think ahead 5 years, 10 years from now?
Well, I think ahead. I plan my future. I plan to go to college and so forth, but we really just live one day at a time.
All right, tell me about the car. What kind of car?
Oh, it's a Chevy Cavalier.
Yeah.
It's black and it's got gray interior.
And have you taken driving school yet?
No, but I'm learning to drive now. I have a learner's permit.
So how soon before you get behind the wheel?
June 8th.
Are we going to have to watch out in the streets of the roads of Indiana? Should we put out an alert right now?
No.
Going to be a good driver, huh?
Yeah.
All right, well, may you drive many miles.
Ryan was 18 when he died just a few days ago. Samantha Smith, who died in a plane crash a few years back, would have been 18 by now. Samantha became famous when she was 10. She was cute as a button and smart as a whip, and she wrote a letter to the then Soviet leader, Yuri Andropov.
What did you write to him, and then what did he write back?
Well, I asked him, why do you want to conquer the world? And he wrote back to me and said that he wanted nothing of the kind, and gave me a little history lesson on the last war they had, and he said that he didn't want to have a war or anything like that again.
And what else did you ask him?
Well, I asked him who would start the war first.
Not him, I'll bet.
Yeah, he said that if we were going to have a war, they would never be the first ones to start it.
Well, now that you've gone through this experience, and I must say it's one of the more effective exercises in diplomacy that we've seen in this country in quite a while, now that you've completed it, what do you conclude from all of this?
Well, I just hope we can have peace and hope it'll do some good.
There's no way of predicting sometimes what will capture people's interest about a particular story. I mean, look at what had happened in the Philippines. It was a revolution fueled by people power, led by the widow of an assassinated political martyr. It forced one of Washington's oldest and strongest allies into political exile. We got the first interview with Marcos in Hawaii. And what sticks in everyone's memory? Shoes.
When people heard I was coming out to do an interview with you, you know what most people are interested in?
Mm-hmm.
Your wife's 3,000 pairs of shoes.
How many shoes?
How many shoes?
Can you wear on 20 years?
Exactly. How many can you?
Well, she buys all kinds of shoes. She has probably to change shoes twice a day. And there are parties where she can wear high heels. There are parties where she has to wear short heels.
Mr. President, 3,000 pairs of shoes, hundreds and hundreds of...
20 years. These are collections for 20 years.
The extravagant use of money and power have always fascinated us. Now, toss in a couple more ingredients, sex and religion, and you have the makings of the most watched Nightline program ever, Jim and Tammy. Tonight, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker join us to tell their side of the story in their first live television interview since leaving the PTL ministry.
Nice to see you.
Miss Baker, one more time, and then I'm going to drop it. You're saying that Jerry Falwell is lying when he accuses you of having had sex with Jessica, and when he says that there have been homosexual incidents dating back from 1956 to the present.
I admitted that I've had 15 to 20 minute relationship with Jessica Hahn.
Yeah, but you heard the one he described today. That's the one. That's the one with 3 men involved, with a prostrate Jessica Hahn, who is not even able apparently to defend herself against the advances of the third man, who is anonymous. I mean, you heard Jerry Falwell say that. You are saying that's a lie.
Yeah, the story just seems to get bigger and bigger, and I'm just sorry about it. And I've looked into the homosexual charges, and I would again say, if anyone has these charges against me, I want them to come forward publicly with this proof.
I have been married to this man for 26 years, and I can tell you one thing: he's not homosexual, or is he bisexual. He's a wonderful, loving husband.
They also said you were kind of like a shopping machine. I mean, you would go out and...
I do like to shop. I'm probably well known for my shopping.
Yeah.
But I am a bargain hunter.
I was very much concerned before that first interview that I not do them an injustice, and I think I was probably a little too easy on them the first time. By the time Jim Baker came back on Nightline, I felt he'd been a little too successful in ducking the hard questions. I was a lot tougher than I'd been in the first interview.
Why does Jim Baker have to inflict himself on the American public? Why is it necessary for you to maintain... I mean, what kind of a role model do you think you are?
Well, I hope I haven't inflicted myself on the American people. And the only role model I hope I could be is a sinner saved by grace, and that there's hope for me and there's hope for everyone else.
That's fine, but I mean, why should you be preaching anything? Why should you be restored as a minister?
Are you asking that as a prejudgment that you don't think I should be?
I'm asking that with certainly a healthy dose of cynicism. I'm saying here is a man who certainly mismanaged funds.
There is no money missing at PTL. This was a hoax perpetrated by Jerry Falwell. That $92 million missing and all these other things. It's just simply not so.
Jim and Tammy notwithstanding, Nightline has the reputation of being a rather serious program. That has not prevented others from taking us a little less seriously, and it certainly hasn't prevented me from making a fool of myself. We'll show you what I mean when we come back.
Good evening, I'm Ted Koppel. We have just received word that buckwheat has been shot.
The minute Saturday Night Live started doing parodies of Nightline, the minute I started seeing cartoons of me and Nightline, the minute that Johnny Carson and David Letterman began making fun of Nightline.
You know, it's a known fact that kids love TV stars, and, well, who's their favorite? I think this Halloween you'll find it's this guy right here, Nightline's Ted Koppel.
It was the best thing that could happen. That meant that we were enough of an established broadcast now that A, there was something to make fun of, and B, people got the joke. I mean, you can't make fun of something or someone that no one ever heard of.
I got rather broke on Jennings, the same thing. I went crazy this year. Got the 4-speed model with the wall mount. Good choice. This one's for Koppel.
I am not the issue here.
Oh, yes, you are, Ted. You've replaced the IRS.
Yes.
If the government wants to get someone,
They don't investigate their taxes.
No, they don't.
They book them on couple.
They book them.
In less than 10 words, Mrs. Ambassador, describe what to this administration would be considered a country friendly to the United States.
In less than 10 words.
That's 5 words so far. Continue.
Well,
6 words. 4 left. Go on.
a country that is...
Thank you.
In over 30 years, I have never broken up on the air. 95% of the time, after all, Nightline is live, and if I crack up, that's it. But there was one time when we pre-taped an interview with a Soviet cosmonaut. I still laugh every time I see that guy's eyebrows go up. Mr. Grechko, thank you very much for joining us. What to you is the most exciting thing about what has happened in space in the last 25 years?
Today is 25 years. I took part in the launch of the first artificial satellite, Sputnik.
And as the interview started and progressed, it became clearer and clearer that he didn't understand what Ted was saying. Ted did not understand what he was saying.
I was very young, maybe because of it.
And after a while, Ted just began to chuckle, and then laugh, and then guffaw.
We are...
and finally just could not control himself anymore, fell over the desk, and the interview just totally fell apart.
I don't know what I would have done if the program had been live, bitten my tongue, chewed my cheeks, but again, it's sort of a bizarre example of what happens when you're not live, because it always leaves you an out. The worst thing we're going to do is throw the tape away. Unfortunately for me, no one did. The Orgone Guru. He's been frustrating officials in that state for years. I must tell you, 90 Rolls Royces seem a little bit of excessive, even for a very close friendship.
Excessive to me.
Why not?
Even 900 will not be excessive.
The Bhagwan was a piece of work to begin with. But he was relatively harmless compared to this woman who was working in his behalf and who came to be known around our shop as Bull Beep Sheila. Sheila liked to use that particular phrase whenever she disagreed with something. And she was quite disagreeable.
I believe that the man himself is here illegally.
Bullshit.
He is not an American citizen.
If we had any reliability that what these folks are saying we could believe, that would be one thing.
You are full of shit. You don't know anything about what reliability is.
I said that Mr. Forbush would have a final word, and he will, and if you're not quiet, we'll just cut the mic off. In that case, we'll cut the microphone off right now. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. He is only 3 years old, but he has herpes.
We did a show once on herpes, and it was a Friday. To make a long story short, we spent 30 minutes on this herpes story. We progressed nowhere. We didn't understand what we were talking about. The subject was all muddied up.
The more serious herpes, the herpes simplex 2.
I'm sorry, herpes simplex 2 is not the most serious, sir.
So again, my question, why do we use the same word?
Well, because we don't.
I apologize if we have done an inadequate or certainly an incomplete job. I thank all of you for joining us this evening. It didn't take Rick Kaplan, the executive producer, and me more than 10 minutes after the program to come to the conclusion that we had to do something we had never done before or since, and that is do the same program all over again.
So Monday, 2 days later, we come back and we say to the audience,
those of you who didn't see the broadcast, don't worry, you're probably better off. Those of you who did, give us another chance. We're about to try again. I don't know if we're going to be able to tell this story, really, or show it to you. It's the one I cite whenever I'm asked, what was your most embarrassing Nightline? We were doing a program on censorship. We'd booked the head of the Librarians Union, I think, in Chicago, and this man in Texas, whose mission in life is to find objectionable things in school textbooks and get them taken out. And he held up this one book and said,
this is a book that we find in many public schools for the teaching of sex education and so forth. For instance, it encourages the women to masturbate using a peeled cucumber, etc.
And at that point, I figure, hey, no problem. So long, Texas. We'll go to the other guest in Chicago. And apparently we have just lost Chicago. And folks, I'm afraid you'll just have to believe us that there are times when it seems very strange that we have a technical problem. But believe me, in this particular instance, we have had one. I'll tell you what, David, may I just insert one thing before I leave?
Sure. As long as it's not a cucumber, but you know. Thank you.
Every July 4th, Willie Nelson likes to throw a big concert barbecue at which I understand a certain quantity of spirits is also consumed. July 4th was also the occasion on which Rick Kaplan liked to see how far we could push our luck. That's how Nightline came to cover the Independence Day Bash with Willie and Chris Christopherson.
Number of mistakes we made. One, concerts are loud.
There's so much noise going on back there, you guys can't hear me at all, can you? Chris, if you can hear me in any way, why don't you tell Willie to get back on stage, because I know he's going to sing a song in just a moment. I hope he's going to.
Great out there.
Great job out there.
Yeah.
Your hair looks weird, Miles. Did you sleep with a hat on or something?
What's wrong with my hair?
It's flat.
I hate this hair. This is the last time I go to Ted Koppel's barber.
There is one question which is quite literally head and shoulders above all the others. And a surprising number of you have asked it over the years. It boils down to, is it? And the answer is, yes, it is mine. What have we left out? Perhaps the greatest moments of all have come when we've taken Nightline on the road.
This is a special edition of Nightline. This week in the Holy Land.
It's Tuesday morning here in Jerusalem.
It is Friday morning here in Beijing. China is in the grip of what its citizens are calling the White Terror.
Good evening, I'm Ted Koppel in Manila, and this is Nightline. Almost miraculously, the departure of Ferdinand Marcos from the Philippines was accomplished nearly without bloodshed. For the next few nights, my colleagues and I will range back and forth across Southeast Asia, trying to put some perspective on what might otherwise be little more than a Vietnamese victory celebration. South Africa is changing. For the next 5 nights, we'll show you many different sides of this rich, fascinating, and terribly controversial country.
I'm 53 years of age. You would, I suppose, say that I'm reasonably responsible. In my own country, I do not vote. According to this government, I am not a South African.
There are millions of blacks who vote. He does not want to vote in one of the national states of which he is probably a citizen. Did not want to accept citizen of a certain country, but we have decided. No, I have not interrupted.
No, but I think
Bishop, just let the Prime Minister. Please let the Prime Minister.
If you are fair and a Christian, you will allow me also to say my bit.
Prior to that moment in 1985, those two men had never spoken publicly to one another before. And you were looking at a live shot, 6:30 in the morning here in South Africa. By the time we returned to South Africa earlier this year, we were able to assemble an interracial panel appearing before an interracial audience, although there were still some moments of tension.
I fear nobody, including you. So it's not a matter of fear or that. It's a matter of...
if you want to speak...
I've stood up before in other meetings, and so I commend you because you're the only person with the strength of character and enough guts and enough balls to stand up and say what you really think and to stand by what you really think.
Let's see if we can just complete Mr. Van der Merwe's exit, though, because he's been trying very hard to leave.
Don't leave, Mr. Van der Merwe. Don't leave. Just don't talk to the sons of bitches, but don't leave. Sit there.
All right. Yes, the thought did cross my mind that he might pull something other than a sheaf of papers out of that briefcase, but again, the magic of live television is that there's not much you can do except move on with the program.
I understand. Then get back to the microphone, otherwise no one will hear you respond, okay?
It is almost 7:30 in the morning here in Jerusalem, and we are gathered with a mixed audience of Jews and Palestinians. The town meeting in Israel was a high watermark for Nightline. It came within an inch of never happening.
I approached the executive producer at that time, Rick Kaplan, and I said, well, in the past 24 hours, I've put together 4 panels of Palestinians, and they've all collapsed, and I don't know what I'm going to do now. And he said, well, what's it going to take to make this happen? I said, a wall. He said, well, what kind of wall? I said, a little wall. He said, okay, well, no problem, we'll give you a wall.
So here it is. I will try and spend as much time on one side as on the other. Let me, in fact, as I move across our fence right now.
D.C., divided city, a national town meeting.
And then, in our own backyard, here in Washington, at a town meeting on racism, Patricia Godley, who wasn't scheduled to speak, wasn't even invited to be in the audience, as best I can recall, got up and blew everyone away.
You got a lot of addicts out there that are suffering. I'm recovering today. But you have a lot of them out there, man, that are suffering still. That don't see no hope. That don't see no way out. Do you know that the jail is a relief? They glad when you lock them up. They get 3 meals, a hot and a cat, and a clothes to wear, get taken care of. They get more than they get out the street. They need some help with learning that their life is worth something more than a piece of rock in a pipe.
In the final analysis, it's always the unexpected that gives any news program its most dramatic moments. And as often as not, those moments catch us at the end of a long day when we'd been planning to do something altogether different. This is going to be a broadcast on which we will all be flying very much by the seat of our pants, because events are quite literally changing minute by minute. The wounded are scattered about in different hospitals in Karachi tonight. Disaster on the Potomac. We'll have a live report from the scene of today's jetliner crash in the heart of Washington. Remember Lenny Skutnik, who dove into the Potomac River one freezing winter afternoon? What made you jump into that river? It's not only courage, there has to be a certain kind of magnificent insanity about it all.
Well, just sitting there watching all the unsuccessful attempts to try to get to those people, it just, when I saw that girl let go, something just told me, go in after her.
Over the years, what saved us again and again has been our affiliates, some local reporter or cameraman who was there when disaster struck.
These huge iron beams that support it fell down on the hundreds of people below. You can see people trapped underneath. There are still people at this hour even trapped underneath, and people simply...
A series of devastating tornadoes hits the south and parts of the Midwest. We'll go live to the scene.
I just want you to know this was the most frightened I have ever been in my life. Thank you, God, for sparing me.
It sounded as though, you know, for a moment you almost couldn't control yourself.
I think I realized how close to death that I really was.
An earthquake of major proportions hits California from San Jose north to the Bay Area of San Francisco.
It's been a frightening scene here. As you can see just below me is where this crack in the Bay Bridge occurred, a 50-foot
I'm at the corner of Jefferson and Divisadero. You can see the fire down past me. What has happened is that the natural gas lines have ruptured, and that is what has caused that fire. The water lines have ruptured. There is no water coming out of the fire hydrants.
It should be readily apparent to our affiliates down the line not only that we have gone over a little bit beyond our allotted time, but also why. The affiliates are pretty understanding for the most part, but then we don't abuse it. I don't think I've done it more than a couple of times over the last 10 years anyway. Long-suffering affiliates. I'd like to warn our affiliates we're going to go just a couple of minutes over tonight. We're going to go just a little bit long tonight. We're coming to that point when we would normally be going off the air. And in order to accommodate that report, we will be going over just a few minutes tonight. I promise to exercise more control in the future. And if you want to miss out on this, you dump out. Otherwise, hang in. If you you take nothing else away with you from this program tonight, please do consider this. What we've been trying to do for 10 years now is to harness the exploding technology of telecommunications to bring you conflicting ideas from all over the world as interestingly and as creatively as we can. Sometimes, I must admit, we bore even ourselves. But every once in a while, there's a translucent moment when it all comes together and works. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all the men and women who've been my co-workers here at Nightline over the past 10 years, thank you and good night.